Hello and welcome back to the Guts and Glory MMA podcast. I am Paul O'D, and this week I am joined by MMA statistician and Guts and Glory fame, Mr. Andy Hickey. How are you doing, Andy?
Hi, Paul. How are you, brother?
Very good. How was your weekend?
Standard weekend of alcoholism and UFC and MMA for myself. So
You were telling me I'm working all weekend, so I didn't get to see most of the fights. But you were telling me there was lots of fights from Thursday straight through to Saturday that you were keeping an eye on.
yeah, Cage Warriors had the trilogy. I think it might be the final trilogy event.
Yeah,
They had events Thursday, Friday, Saturday. UFC was an early one. Saturday was great. I think the main event was over like 2:30 or 3 o'clock.
yeah,
It's
not
beautiful.
too late.
And then
Yeah,
next week we got a 9 o'clock main card start, so it's
happy
really nice
days,
at the
yeah.
moment.
Long continue those early cards because the 5 o'clock in the mornings are a thing of the past for me anyway. I was always the guy to watch the fights late, but of late there's not a chance I'm staying up until 5 o'clock in the morning unless it's a big one.
There's always a sleeper that catches me. It's like I find myself having to watch so many of them the next day. Even I missed
Yeah.
Volkanovski and Ortega live because Shevchenko and Murphy put me to sleep in like the first or second round. And I woke up on the couch. I was like, fuck, not another one.
Yeah. As long as you don't check your phone or anything like that and you can watch in peace the next day, it's not too bad. But I'm murder. I'll always check my phone. So this week we're touching on a few things. We're touching on Jon Jones. I don't know even what to say about it, but we'll be touching on Jon Jones' antics, I suppose. The additions of Sandhagen and Hooker to UFC 267, and we're also gonna touch on Dana White's rant on fighter pay after Contender Series this past Tuesday, and of course we're gonna look back at the weekend's action. So in the words of Liam O'Griffin, what is it? I can't even remember.
Because there's lots to be getting, so let's be getting on.
Let's be
Like
something along those lines anyway.
He's the only man that can do that.
I want to fight with Chuck. Chuck.
I think he just blew his wad there.
Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck.
Where you at, McNuggets, you fucking piece of shit? I'm killed with all the gods. Gods recognize gods.
So yes, I suppose we'll start out with Mr. Jon Jones. What to say? Like, obviously this happened kind of around the time of the podcast or just after the podcast last week, but it was only kind of, the news was kind of breaking in bits and pieces since then. So I didn't really want to touch on it last week and give it the full, let it play out and see what actually happened. But what do you make of the whole ordeal?
They look like happy families now with his Instagram posts. But
Jesus
Jon Jones
Christ.
he's going to Jon Jones. He's a bad guy, you know,
Yeah.
And not in the sense of Chael Sonnen. He's a piece of shit, like, you know.
He's not a
at the end
heel.
of the
He's a
day.
genuine bad guy. Like,
Yeah, he's a prick. But like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's entertainment. The UFC is not a sporting contest. It's an entertainment contest. That's the way Dana White sees it. If you look at Jon Jones' pay-per-view selling ability, it's not amazing, but he's
No.
like averages about 650,000.
yeah.
So he's bringing in significant.
He's still one of the
revenue
top
to the
5
UFC.
to 6 guys in the UFC.
Yeah. So he's going to be under no pressure with the UFC. They're just waiting for him to come up with the heavyweight fight for the belt and give them that million pay-per-view, you know, revenue. So like Jones is an absolute disaster.
Mm.
If he was a random part of the organization, he would have been cut 10 years ago when he first started getting into these infractions. So he's just a nightmare to manage. I thought it was hilarious the day before his new advisor, he's gone from Malky, his new advisor was saying, this guy, you know, he's on a great path now and our heavyweight debut is going to be so good. And you know, 12 hours later, he's in a jail cell
But
with alleged.
it's 5 or 6 hours after his fucking Hall of Fame speech. That's what's bananas. The dude is up there accepting an entrance into the Hall of Fame, and he goes and does this shit a few hours later.
Well, I've been in Vegas quite a few times, and I guess the better or the best of us.
But it's one of those, all right, look, we all make mistakes, and I get that. And there was actually a very interesting post from Izzy saying we all make mistakes when we're young or whatever, but we learn from them. Jon Jones just doesn't learn from his mistakes. It's over and over again. And from what, look, it's hard to say what happened because nobody knows, only Jon Jones and his wife, what happened in the room. But like Izzy alluded to in his post, that's not, if what went down, it's not the first time that's happened in that house.
No, absolutely not. You should see the history of his. I don't like the way he blames everything. He doesn't accept responsibility as well. Like I'm quite fond of alcohol, and it doesn't turn me.
We all are. We're Irish, though.
But it doesn't turn us into a lunatic going around hitting cars and allegedly abusing your spouse. That comes from within. Like, alcohol probably brings out the truth more than it brings out a different side of you. So, Jon Jones. But the funny thing about it is Jon Jones is going to come back at heavyweight, look sensational, win the belt, and nothing's going to happen. Like, an example I give, look at Mike Tyson. He served prison for a heinous crime. Came out of it like nothing happened. Pay-per-view star again.
Movie star since.
Movie star. Currently has his Hotbox podcast where everybody in the world wants to get on and sit beside someone that's done been convicted of a crime that probably doesn't deserve where he is. So Jones is just going to seamlessly move back in my opinion.
But look, I've been arguing this for the last, I suppose, last year since this whole thing started to transpire with heavyweight. I don't think Jones wants to fight Ngannou. I don't think Jones wants to fight Cyril Gane anymore. Can you genuinely see him coming back and make you run at heavyweight?
I think Jon Jones is the best fighter in the world, without a shadow of a doubt. He's been in there with some difficult fighters like Cormier. He made Cormier look very, very average, and Cormier is the furthest thing from average.
Yep.
I think, if Stipe was the champion, we'd be all for Jon Jones taking that belt down. Obviously, Ngannou and Cyril Gane are different breed. The Gane is he's like Jones 2.0 in the way he moves around at heavyweight. There'd be sensational bouts. I think it's just logical. You see a lot of fighters moving divisions and they just go into championship fights straight away. And why wouldn't Jon Jones, who's just sensational record through the years, just move in there? I can't see him, if he's a heavyweight, I can't see him taking like a test in the waters like Anderson Silva used to do back in the day. But I can't see any reason why he would be scared to go in there against an Ngannou or
I think he is. I don't know. Look, I could be wrong, but I think even his latest thing where he's moving up to 275 pounds of pure muscle, I think that he doesn't want to be outsized. He's been the bully his whole career, and that's his MO. Anytime he's gone in there against guys that are the same size as him or just as physical as him, he's struggled and arguably lost some of those bouts. Obviously, he didn't. But when looking at them after the fact and scoring them 2 or 3 times, I still struggle to see how some of them went in his favour. Obviously, they say you have to beat the champion, but he's going to be going into a position now where he has to beat the champion, a bigger guy, a tougher guy. Are the decisions going to go his way in close fights like that if he's up against an Ngannou or a Cyril Gane?
Yeah, like if you look historically, I suppose the Gus fight, Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes, all close fights. Like, I'm not a qualified judge, but I've never scored a Jon Jones fight for his opponent. I've always had Jon Jones winning at all points. He has extremely underrated grappling ability. We've seen that. He's striking. He always uses his range to evade strikes, but that's probably not going to work against Cyril. And Ngannou coming in with those wide windmills would probably open up opportunity. But it's a great narrative. It's a serious story to have coming through at heavyweight, a division that hasn't really had spark over the years. It really bring it to life. But you're hesitant that it might happen. I probably would be myself. I hope if he remains in the UFC, a big if, that it is heavyweight, because light heavyweight is certainly dying on its feet at the moment. So
and that's it. The heavyweight division right now, there's a resurgence. That you've Chris Daukaus, you've Tom Aspinall, you've 5 or 6 guys at the top that are world class for the first time in a very long time, I might add, in the heavyweight division. You add Jon Jones to that, it certainly is interesting. But I want to go back to what position is Dana White in. He's taken a stand on certain things in the past and said that he won't condone it, and it's not his business to condone it. And he's made this point before that the UFC will live without the likes of Conor McGregor, without Jon Jones. But again, he's made exceptions for them, like Connor with things that he's done in the past, and and John with multiple things he's done in the past. Do you think he's going to be put in a position soon, if this keeps happening, that he's going to have to cut Jon Jones?
No.
Don't see it happening at all.
It's a business model. We always hear about the liar in the background with Dana White. I just can't see a company that's so money hungry and driven by profit ever releasing Jon Jones, who's a global star in the sport, who's going to bring money into them, and say, go over there to Scott Coker or Bellator and bring up their viewership through the roof. I just don't see it. From a moral perspective, Jones should have been gone years ago, especially when he did the driving incident.
With the pregnant,
with the pregnant girl. If he was going to get cut, it would have happened. And I just, since the likes of Ari Emanuel came in, the money that's involved and Hughes Jones' way of generating it, I just don't think they're going to cut him out of the business.
Yeah, for me, obviously, I don't think he fights at heavyweight unless it's against a Stipe or someone like that, or Stipe gets back to the belt. I could be very wrong in it, and there's a part of me hopes I'm wrong, even though he doesn't deserve a chance. It's just for sporting purposes. I would like to see, if there's anyone watching live there, they might send in their comments and let us know what they want to do, what they want to see with Jon Jones next. Do they want to see him fight at heavyweight? Do they want to see him cut? What do they want to do? But I suppose we'll move on to UFC 267, which all of a sudden looks like an extremely different card over the course of the last week. It was supposed to be Yan and Sterling. Obviously, Sterling fell out, and it got announced this week that Sandhagen is stepping up for the interim bantamweight title. And then Hooker, who was only fought 2 weeks ago, is stepping up on a month's notice to fight one of the most feared people in the lightweight division, Islam Makhachev, and foregoing his return home and his place in the quarantine in New Zealand, meaning that he could be stuck stateside until December or even longer, which is absolutely mad. But I think Hooker is going to gain so many new fans. Win, lose, draw out of this one, he's gaining so many fans by taking this fight on short notice.
Absolutely, he's gained one of me. I've never been a lover of Dan Hooker's, especially when he put that persona online. But I loved his comment on Instagram. He just put up a picture of the fight and then burned the boats. Was the comment with it, and that's it's coming from an old sailing thing where they'd landed somewhere they were trying to conquer, and they'd burned the boats because they were going to die or take over the land. I think it was really a really cool way of going. But they released a betting line for that fight, and it's absolutely crazy of how big an underdog Hooker is when you think about the standard of fighter he's been in there in the last few years. Like he went toe to toe with Dustin Poirier, Paul Felder in amazing contests. And like Makhachev, he comes with all the hype in the world. He comes from a place in the world where fighters are known to be sensational. But bottom line is, Islam Makhachev has not been tested at the elite level of the sport yet.
Maybe his last one, but even at that, was he really, really tested in that? But he hasn't fought enough people up there for sure to say that he's world class yet.
No, and then Hooker, I think Hooker's about a 4-1 underdog. I can't get it through in my head how he's so big. It's crazy, the line that's been sent out there, and especially his ability. I just don't understand it. But yeah, I think you're right. He's going to generate such a big fan base from this fight, and if he wins, he has got all the momentum in the world behind him to be going straight into that title picture.
He's in the picture for sure if he wins. Yeah, what's Makhachev now? Makhachev's in at number 5, I believe.
Yeah, he's top 5 these days. Yeah, which is
and we've had this problem in the lightweight division for a very long time, that guys in the top 5 aren't fighting each other. They're sitting out waiting for a title shot, but they won't fight down. It appears Makhachev, to be fair, has said for so long that he'll fight anyone. He's happy to take this fight as well on short notice, so there has to be some credit given to Makhachev for taking this fight, because Hooker's a banana skin coming in at number 10, 11 in the world.
Yeah, when he lost the back-to-back fights, he slipped down significantly, but he's a good fighter. He ticks all the boxes. What does he do wrong? There's never really been, bar the Michael Chandler fight when he just got decimated with the left. That's really the only time we've seen a huge shortcoming from Dan Hooker. So,
and do you think that Hooker's confident going into this one based on the fact that he's done very well against Makhachev's style of fighter with the knees up the middle, with his uppercuts, and he enjoys wrestlers coming forward at him and being able to strike. Obviously, the exception is the Chandler fight, but his style kind of plays nicely into a Makhachev where it might go 5 rounds, but he's tough. He's very hard to get out of there on the mat, and if he's on his feet, he's a danger every time you try and take him down.
Dan Hooker's got nothing to lose in this fight. Absolutely nothing. It's all on Makhachev. Makhachev has to get him down. He has to get through those. What kind of reach Hooker possesses? His body composition is just so unorthodox with those long legs and long arms for a guy that fought at 145 before and now fights at 155. Of course, the stop in Dagestani wrestling and is a whole different thing, and we can talk about it all day, but I like Hooker's shot at it, to be honest.
Yeah, we have a few comments coming in there. Sorry, no, just to cut across you, but we have Queel to the Bar is in the house. Yup, Tipperary. We have Greg O'Sullivan is in the house. Liam is watching somewhere screaming in the intro at the screen. I'm sure he is. I was always going to butcher it. He's butchered it enough times, so it was always going to happen. Andy Hickey MMA is the GOAT, but I have to go for pints on my own now, says David Askins. Did you let poor David down this evening?
I did. Sunday night pints are gone.
And Quilcha again, greetings from Leeds Airport. Disclaimer, it's shite here. Drink is overpriced too. And then he says Jones versus Rehab might help first. But in all seriousness, Gane versus Miocic are fights that would be phenomenal for Jones. I don't think he would take an Ngannou fight unless he was forced to. That's my opinion as well, Quilcha. I do think he's trying to avoid that Ngannou fight. But it's easy to say from my position, but just the way he was kind of, when Ngannou won the belt and that series of tweets that came out the next day, and then what transpired after with him asking for 20 million and now trying to move up from 230 pounds to 275 pounds, it smells of a guy that's scared to get in there with a bigger guy. And we don't even know if Ngannou's going to be holding that strap. I've sneaking suspicion that Gane is probably going to be the guy to beat at heavyweight going forward. And Gane against Jon Jones, I know arguably we know he doesn't hit as hard as Ngannou, but Jon Jones against Gane, like Jones' whole thing is having the elite level striking on everyone. Does he have that over Gane?
No, and it looks like Gane moves quicker as well across the floor.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think, as I said earlier, I think Jones has sneaky good grappling ability. It goes under the radar so much.
Yeah,
and I think he can turn that on when he needs to.
Yeah, but what's he going to look like at 275 pounds as well?
He might move like a snail. God knows. It's any, like, if you were to look online and all these betting experts that do their thing, if anybody was serious about that fight, you just leave it alone, because we can talk about it all day long, but no one is going to know what Jon Jones heavyweight's going to look like. It could be the most amazing thing in the world, or it could be a guy that looks just done and dusted. I don't know, but it intrigues me. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah, for sure. We are going to move back to the 267 card. We touched on Sandhagen coming in on short notice as well. Before we get to the Sandhagen-Yan matchup itself, what do you make of Sterling and it pulling out of this one again? And I know, fair enough, he does have an injury, but what do you make of the whole situation and him not being stripped of the title?
I think like he's trying to fight, but the UFC doctors won't medically clear him.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a case of Sterling pulled out of the fight. He just can't get cleared. I don't think he should be stripped. I don't think there should be an interim bout. I do not think Corey Sandhagen coming off a loss should be in an interim title fight. No. I think it's a shit show with the UFC again, just trying to keep fights together on cards for a promotional aspect. There's nothing wrong with saying to Sterling, you know what, come back to us in 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, towards the end of the year, and let's see how your injury is then, and then reassess the situation. Amanda Nunes hasn't defended her bantamweight title since 2019.
Yeah.
And there's been nothing word said. Sterling fought, I think was it March or April, the last card when he was on, and I know he's not a popular champion, and people don't like the way he carries on, but let's put it down on paper and look at what's done, I just hate everything about this, bar the fact that Jan and Sandhagen's an absolute banger of a fight.
It's a fantastic fight, but it's a title fight with two guys coming off a loss.
The first time ever.
Which is bananas. I feel for the likes of Merab Dvalishvili, the likes of Rob Font. How did those guys not get the nod? I know Sandhagen's above them in the rankings, but just to have a guy in there that is coming off a bit of momentum, it would have kind of... They wouldn't have two guys coming in off a loss, basically. And what's TJ's story? Do you know anything with regard to why TJ turned down the fight?
He couldn't make the fight. Couldn't get healthy enough. But I think even with Sandhagen, people have just quietly swept under the floorboards that Aljamain Sterling left him unconscious in the octagon in about 60 seconds flat.
Yeah.
Like Sandhagen is an insanely entertaining fighter to watch. Kaposa, the go to Twitter, obviously always puts him down with the violence with title fights. But I hate it. I hate the whole scenario of why we're here. With it.
And it look, I'd understand it more if it was a card that didn't already have a title fight on it. But you have Blachowicz versus Teixeira on that card already. So why not just make it a non-title bout?
And this isn't even a pay-per-view in America. So there's no need to sell the card to make to generate income, I suppose. I think they're just putting it in there because nobody likes Aljamain Sterling. Let's try
appease
put an
the
interim
fans.
strap on someone and hold the UFC doctors don't clear him, and then we can promote up. It's crazy. Like, two guys, like technically, and on a loss, two guys fighting for a UFC title on a loss, an interim title. It's just fucking ridiculous. Like Rob Font, his performance against Cody Garbrandt, I think he would have been the front runner after Dillashaw in my book.
Well, Merab, what was it, 2 weeks ago, looked absolutely sensational as well. He probably wouldn't have been medically cleared after that first round, but I mean, that's another guy that if it had been a little bit more notice, I would have certainly had a stake to claim going for that interim title. We are going to move on to Dana's little post-scrum rant that he had on Oscar De La Hoya and fighter pay. Did you watch the whole thing through?
I did.
What did you make of him?
He hates Oscar De La Hoya. That's one thing, just for damn sure.
It's look, I and you know what? I've kind of been on the side all along that fighter pay is an issue. Overall, it is an issue in the sport, but these guys sign contracts. And they come out midway through their contract and start refusing to fight. They want more money and they start giving out this, that, and other thing. Fight out your contract and try and negotiate for what you believe you're worth. You either get it or you don't. And Dana, I'm not Dana's biggest fan. I think everyone knows that. But he made some good points about how much they invest back in the sport. Like, we know that they invest heavily in IMAF. They support other countries, like they're building offices, PIs around the world, different things like that. And at the end of the day, it is a business and they're looking to make a profit. But they're doing things that I suppose other leagues, like your Bellator, their fighter split is, I believe it's close to 50%, around 46%. And they're saying the UFC is around 20, just less than 20%.
18%.
18%. So... But what are Bellator reinvesting in? I mean, a lot of their money is coming from Viacom anyway.
Yeah.
So
Bellator can't possibly be making a profit.
Yeah.
Their annual loss must be insane. One released their profit and loss a few weeks ago, and only for a contribution of, I think it was $200 to $400 million from their backers, they would have been in a severe loss for the year. So, it comes with negatives and pros. I think the major one that fans don't like is the releases from the UFC in their business model that they will never go above 20% fighter pay, and they're actually trying to cap it there. So it's not an unfortunate coincidence that fighters are on this base rate of pay. It's it's a selected thing that they're doing to keep them there. I don't agree with fighters like Cheyenne Boys was very notorious for a couple of months ago when she was saying, she's broke. But like, you're 4-1 pro who's somehow in the UFC on
Mhm.
the prelims of a fight night card, do you expect to be fighting for $1 million purses? Where are you with it? And it's a huge jump from regionals. Like, I love a lot of regional promotions, but the pay in them is, I've seen some
Appalling.
of the pay
Yeah, yeah.
scales. It's not good. And when you're going from those into 10 and 10, I think is the minimum contract. It's a substantial increase. But the UFC have 700 fighters on the roster,
Yeah.
and they can't all be, a huge,
They can't all be multimillionaires. Makes
yeah,
no
yeah.
sense.
Like,
Yeah.
I really wish that they were paid far significantly, especially guys who were in the main event, like Brian Ortega, who's taken life-threatening or life-shortening impacts. I wish that
Yeah.
guy was on serious amount of dollars, but I wish the fighters were paid more, but I can understand from the business model why they have it at the way they do.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of that, Liam always alludes to this as well when we talk about fighter pay. Shane Boys, the example you gave, so she's on the base pay, I imagine, in her first contract. Like you said, 4-1 in the UFC. But she's got probably, I'm going to guess, 40, 50,000 followers on Instagram. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
if she markets herself well, she could make a living wage, or at least enough to pay the bills, doing something outside of fighting, just using her social media or different things, different doors that have been opened by just getting into the UFC. So the responsibility is on the fighters as well. Like I say, when they negotiate their contracts, the responsibility is on them and their management. And outside of fighting as well, the responsibility is on them to make more money.
The big elephant in the room as well is unionization. So
Yeah.
you can't, a single individual is never going to achieve anything. It's going to take a core group to come together. But the problem that they have is, if you sheared off, 300 fighters from the UFC, well, there's 3,000 more ready to go in there and fight for, the base level contract that they have, just to try to get their name out there. So it's going to take, if it ever increases, it's going to take the top of the range fighters, and not I can't remember what it was called a few years ago, the one that was fronted by Bjorn Rebney, Dillashaw, Velasquez, Cowboy. It's going to take something a bit more significant than that to get it over the line.
Interestingly enough, on this topic, I believe Mark Hunt won his lawsuit against the UFC quite recently, and we know what's lurking in the background with the antitrust. Do you think this is kind of a prelude to what we're going to see down the road, and they're going to be forced to make changes due to the antitrust lawsuit?
It's quite possible. But I never, when it comes to that thing, the person wielding the wallet usually has the hammer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not educated enough in it to have a great opinion on it. I just know that the amount of money that is in that company is insane.
Yep.
And even their higher level model, I don't know. I think they have the fighters bent over really here.
Yeah, there's not a whole pile they can do, and there's a reason that fighters, still knowing what they know, strive to get to the UFC. Like, don't get me wrong, a lot of fighters, educated fighters and fighters know what they're doing, are choosing Bellator now over the UFC because they know what they can make there. But the big goal for people that see themselves as a future world champion, they're all still targeting the UFC down the road.
Yeah, nobody wakes up. Like, we have a lot of fighters at Bellator. Nobody grows up and goes, I want to be Bellator world champion. It's famous. Like, Jamie Carragher once said, nobody grows up wanting to be Gary Neville.
Yeah.
We want, I go into the shower and I hear Bruce Buffer announcing my name as the UFC world champion. Nobody thinks about Bellator like that. And a lot of the Irish fighters are doing it as well. They could go down the route of going to more smaller shows and try to build themselves into the UFC, but they're taking the paycheck from Bellator to try stabilize their finances. I understand that as well. It's a crazy topic, but if we're looking at the future, you're saying with the antitrust and what could come, the big thing in the future that scares me is CTE. Lawsuits coming down the line, because it's going to happen. We see in rugby there, I can't remember his name, but a 42-year-old rugby player is now donating his brain because he's just riddled from CTE. And we think about the impact that MMA fighters are taking. When studies come out there down the line, it's going to get pretty crazy, I'd imagine.
So the only thing I would say there is, I think that would affect commissions more and states more then it's going to affect the UFC as a body, because they outsource for the very most part, unless they're in like Ireland now, they bring their own kind of regulatory body to do the judging, the refereeing, everything. Same if they go over to Abu Dhabi or anywhere like that. But for the most part in the States, they outsource completely all that side of it, the refereeing, everything like that. They kind of have themselves protected for the very most part against the lawsuit going forward.
Yeah.
I would imagine, I could be very wrong, I don't know how that would be filed in a way that you're going to be suing the promotion, but I imagine Mark Ratner and the gang there at the UFC have themselves covered far down the line on that, which I'm not saying that's I'm in support of that, but they're fairly shrewd that way. I can't imagine they're going to be affected by lawsuits, but I do think it's going to be a huge issue in 15 years.
It's such a young sport, like when we think of where we are compared to like boxing or any of those sports. It was in 1993 the UFC were founded.
Yeah.
We're in the infancy of it, We're very much in the infancy, and we're going to hit stumbling blocks as we go down the line.
And even like you look back to the first maybe 15 years of it, not that many guys fought 4 times in a year or 4 times in a year. It was a handful of them did, and the rest they might fight once every year or twice a year at the very most, and not in the most technical fights ever. It has advanced quite a bit. So if you've got guys now like Kevin Holland five times a year and going to be in tough fights, it's certainly going to be an issue for a lot of these guys anyway. And you look at Brian Ortega, Jesus Christ, you touched on him earlier. That's a guy that for sure is going to have issues after those 2 championship fights.
First fighter in UFC history to take over 200 significant strikes in multiple bouts.
Yeah,
he took over 400 against Max Holloway.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
That was, we won't go back to the fight last week, but I'm a violence lover, and that made me feel quite uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, I cringed after when he came out in the 4th round. I cringed because I was like, this is a bad decision to put him back out there. And again, I touched on it last week in the podcast. 5th round, he came back, and I was delighted to see that, and he looked good in the 5th round. But I was worried for him when they sent him back out in the 4th. We were not going to get too hung up on older fights. I'm going to quickly go to the comments before we talk about the weekend's action just gone. Greg O'Sullivan is asking, why did RDA drop out of his fight? And he thinks that Rob Font should have had the chance to fight for the interim. I can't disagree with you. Do you know why RDA dropped out?
Injured. I think it's his knee, going for surgery.
Okay.
I think it's his knee.
Yeah, and Will Getling, it's robbery of the fighters. I think he's alluding to the fighters' pay there as well, yeah. Quil Chidabara, regionals pay terribly. That helps the UFC justify their pay even more. I think they should be paying more, but realistically it won't change anytime soon. Certainly not when it comes to regionals, because there's no money and there's no investment in the sport at a lower level just yet. And even in Europe, it's 10 times worse than you have in America or out in the Middle East. At least they have big financial backing for their regional shows. Now, obviously, these are regional shows that are attempting to kind of become much bigger promotions, like your likes of Brave. Over in America, you've Combache, LFA, a couple more. There's decent money there, but if you're here in Europe or Western Europe, the money is absolutely catatonic for young pros. They're essentially paying to fight for the first few fights of their career.
I was talking to a pro fighter.
Yeah.
6 fights, severe winning record, offered a main event slot on an Irish show for a title, who wasn't even given pay nor a hotel fee.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Turned it down subsequently.
Yeah. But there's guys up to 10, 11 fights in their career that I know that essentially paid to fight. It cost them money every fight they had, between training, fight camps, nutrition. Guys that wanted to take it seriously and wanted to get to the top, it essentially cost them thousands of euros. It was like to get a degree, you pay for an education. That's essentially what it was, and they were paying for their education to get to the top level of the sport. But it's all wrong. Any guy who's a professional sports, and especially in the sport they're in, should be getting paid at any level. Hopefully there's investment in the smaller promotions soon. and we can kind of get to see, and there's more support of him. That's what people need. If people are actually watching these promotions, they'll be supported more. There's more money there. Will Getling is asking, does Thiago Santos go to Bellator or stay in the UFC? Now, we're going to get onto that fight, but I'm interested to know there, Will, if you want to jump back in, why you're asking if he'll go to Bellator. I can't imagine seeing him leave UFC right now, coming off the back of that victory, because he was up against it. Is his contract out, do you know? I didn't hear anything about his contract being out.
When he was doing the post-fight interview, he was asking for more money on his next contract.
Okay, so it might be out.
Yeah, it's potentially out, but what's Santos going to achieve by going to Bellator? Just extra money.
That's it, yeah. And I mean, he's a guy that strikes me. He was like so close to that world title, and then obviously had a couple of tough fights in a row. I imagine it's in him to get back there and to. He hasn't really looked himself, even in the Rakic fight, even in the fight last night. He hasn't looked the Santos of old just yet.
No,
but I think he believes with Jon Jones not in the division, having a win over Blachowicz is a big part mentally, that he can still get to the top and be a world champion in the UFC. I can't see him moving to Bellator. I think it would be a very strange decision at this point in his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of that fight, what did you make of said fight? Because I was going to leave work. I was just finished work. I'd watched the last few fights as people were finishing up, and I was doing the cleanup. And I did a decision, could I race home and try and make the start of the fight? And I was like, this isn't a fight where you want to miss the first minute. So I sat down and said I'd watch it. Half an hour later, I was sitting there in disbelief. It was not a fight I expected to go the distance, and it was not the fight that I expected overall. What did you make of it?
It was so bad, is the only way I can describe it. Both fighters stalled it up completely, point fighting. Not what we've come to know from either of them. The backlash on social media to the style of Walker has been overboard in my opinion, but some of it is quite just. It was a terrible fight. Neither fighter wanted to engage. I don't think Johnny Walker knows what a jab is. It was just really, really poor. I'd struggle to think of worst light heavyweight fights I've ever seen. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, and especially with two guys renowned for having that knockout power, for being explosive fighters, for being terrifying fighters in there, to stand and kind of dance. They were essentially dancing at points in that fight because Johnny was just kind of, he did more feints than I've ever seen in a fight. He actually weirdly pulled off a couple of spinning feints, which I've never seen in MMA before. Like, and fully intended spinning feints. It was a very strange one. The one thing I would say about the change in Johnny's style is if you pull that off and you win the fight and you move to number 5 in the world, it's a stroke of genius. You've outpointed a guy that went into so many fights, and you always said it was a coin flip because he's so wild and it's hit or be hit, especially against the big hitters in the division. If you pull it off, you're a genius. And it was a relatively close fight. But if you have a guy that's got to number 10 in the world by being wild and having his style, and that's who he is, do you change that?
Johnny Walker was in the UFC main event last night because he's Johnny Walker.
That's it.
Lunatic. Spinning techniques, elbows, knees, doing the worm and blowing out your shoulder. Yeah. Johnny Walker is not going to be anywhere near a UFC main event after the performance last night. I scored it for Johnny. I scored it for Johnny comprehensively.
I had 2, 3, and 5 for Thiago. Just on the body kicks essentially outweighed anything Johnny had thrown, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's irrelevant. Like, neither of them won the fight within the UFC hierarchy. Yeah. But if you're on social media all day today, there's only one man being blamed for the loss.
One of our own, yeah.
So one of our own, and one of our greatest sons is being lambasted for his cornering and what he's turned Johnny Walker into. What did you? I obviously live on social media, so fighting with everybody all
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
So how have you done?
I haven't seen a lot of the social media stuff. I haven't been up to date with what's been said on social media about this particular fight. But what I will say is there was one thing that I picked up on from John last night that I would just question, and it was, I said it to you off air, it's a guy going into the last round in a close fight. Even if you believe he's winning the fight, it's dangerous to tell a fighter, or in my opinion, I think you shouldn't be telling a fighter that you're winning the fight, keep doing what you're doing. Don't be telling him that he's winning the fight when it's a very close fight. But then again, I don't know what Johnny needs to be told in a corner. So every
Yeah.
guy needs to be told different things. And, you know, John's one of those guys that he likes to keep everything calm. He likes to keep people composed. That's most of the guys that have come out of his gym that are wild fighters. You always hear him say, all right, keep it flowy, find your rhythm, feint. And that's kind of, that's the MO from SBG anyway. Don't be reckless. Enjoy yourself and find that flow and find that rhythm, and the strikes will come.
Yeah.
So I think people were picking up wrong on a lot of what was being said in the corner. They try and get fighters comfortable in there as opposed to them being inactive. I think once you find your comfort, the punches will come and kicks will come, and you'll see things and you'll be able to land clear. So I don't know. Look, like I said, I didn't see a whole pile of it, but I don't think he was giving terrible advice in the corner per se. I would just question that comment about telling them that he's winning the fight going into the last round, because he needed a small kick up the arse for me going into the last round to make sure of the fight, and I think it was 2-2 going. I'd have scored 2-2 going into that last round. So a small kick up the arse, he could have come out a little, stepped it up a gear, and arguably could have won that fight. And then you're turning around and all the fans are saying John Kavanagh is an absolute fucking genius.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's so fickle. But
I would question, at one point when he was talking that feinting was scoring. Now, I don't know if he was talking about it being effective. Sorry, he said feinting is effective. I don't know if he's talking about it from a scoring stance on the judges, or is he talking about it from, it's working on Thiago to get him into incorrect positions?
I can only imagine he means it's
yeah,
having an effect. Because sometimes in really dull fights, which is exactly what it was, and guys aren't landing that much, they do look for people missing strikes, biting on feints, who's the aggressor, who's coming forward, and those feints kind of lead to that. So I don't know, maybe that's what he was alluding to, but I don't think he believed he was winning on the scorecards due to feints. I don't know. It was, but a strange comment nonetheless. Yeah.
Strange comment. I think the biggest gripe I've had all day dealing with it is, social media. It gives a voice to anybody, right? Like, we've all got voices. Some people might disagree with our opinions or like our opinions, and they're basing the entire level of Irish MMA off what they know about Straight Blast Gym HQ.
Yeah.
And their fighters in the UFC, Makwan Amirkhani, Johnny Walker, Conor McGregor, none of them are having a great run of it lately, and they're tarnishing down the entire world of Irish MMA, when in retrospect we're actually flourishing at the moment.
Yeah. All in promotions all over the world.
Richie Smullen just picked up a belt over in the Ukraine today. Franz Malambo picked up a belt. We got Paul Hughes picked up a belt. McColgan, McKee looking amazing in Cage Warriors.
Palahano
ripping up in Kombache. We are on fire. And these guys online, they only see the UFC, and a loss for Johnny Walker because what they perceive as bad cornering advice for John Kavanagh. So they're just tearing us down strip by strip, and it's frustrating me today. Now, I know internally in Ireland, a lot of what goes on behind the scenes, I get told about it, and I know there's some structural issues in HQ, and we're dealing with things inside the country from an MMA perspective that aren't good, but it's got nothing to do with fucking Johnny Walker, who's trained in Brazil for about 25 years, coming over to SBG for a year or so, and training here and bringing it on site. So I got really frustrated with Irish MMA being tarnished because of last night. It really has pissed me off.
But I mean, it just goes to show how fickle the fans are, because the commentary leading up to last night's fight was that the move over to Ireland had turned around Johnny's career, because he was a guy on a skid and looked like he was on his way out of the UFC. came over to Ireland, had a couple of good fights, and got his career back on track. One bad performance later, and all of a sudden we're back to he doesn't know what he's doing over there. They don't know what they're doing. Look, that's always going to be the case. Unfortunately, because of the McGregor stigma, and John Kavanagh is tied into that intrinsically for the rest of his life. And you've a 50-50 split at this point, if not 40-60 in the opposite direction of people that love and hate McGregor. So any chance they have to strip people down that are close to him, or strip people down that are involved in SPG or HQ or whatever it may be, they're going to take that opportunity. And the fans don't shy away from cutting down the likes of John Kavanagh, Conor, and whoever else is kind of tied or linked to that whole team, essentially. We do need to look at unless you have anything else to add about that fight, which was...
I think I could just speak about Irish MMA all day in general, but I don't think our listeners want to hear the inner works of my mind. We
did a show, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and basically the whole fucking show was Irish MMA. We were talking IMAS, we were talking Combatche, Brave, the whole lot. So they're getting it on the QT regularly anyway. But the co-main event last night, we were kind of touching on it. We were commenting in our group. It was the strangest ending to a fight I've seen in a very long time. And the reason I say that, we've seen no contest, we've seen eye pokes, we've seen head clashes, we've seen all of these different scenarios, but we got to see something very unique last night where Mark Ratner, Sean Shelby, Herb Dean, and Dan Murgliata, and two of the commissioners from the Las Vegas commission were all in a little huddle, and we could hear through the mics what was being said. And
Dean
it was just
mic'd up,
yeah, it was weird to see that whole dynamic, and they discussing what should happen in the outcome of the fight.
But it's something that you'd never see. The sequence of events was crazy. Like, Holland was out
cold,
from the clash.
Yeah.
But he did fight back, and he fought back quite well. But how many times have we seen fighters, get absolutely obliterated or out on their feet and come back with it? I think Aaron Bronster, he's the rep for TSN. I think he had the best version of what should have happened. Now, I hold my hand up and say my understanding of the rules in this particular instance is not where it should be. I didn't know at the time. My immediate guess was no contest.
Yeah.
But I think probably the best route, what should have happened, was Daukaus should have been awarded his victory.
Yep.
And go through the board, appeal it, and it probably should have been back to a no contest. I feel really sad for Daukaus now, Kyle Daukaus, that he is after missing out on a win bonus and a potential performance of the night bonus. Serious money for that guy.
Yeah.
Because he did nothing wrong. That was not an illegal blow. That was an accidental clash.
Yeah.
That his opponent came off worse from.
Yeah,
and he did the right thing.
It wasn't that they ran into each other, is the other point that needs to be made. And it's one of those situations where both guys, we don't know, both guys could have been affected from that. Obviously, Holland was affected a lot worse, but we cannot say that Daukaus was not affected from that blow. So it's one of those situations where if that clash of heads had led to an immediate stoppage of the fight, if he went down and the ref called it there and then because he was out cold, which he was, I understand the no contest then, because it's an illegal strike has led immediately to the ending of a fight. But the fact that he fought back, it went on for maybe almost another minute before the stoppage. I think, like you said, Daukaus could feel aggrieved of not getting the victory. And what I will say here is Kevin Holland, fair play to him after the fight, was openly said that it was bullshit, and he believed that the victory should have gone to Daukaus after the fact.
Yeah, I think the villain in this picture is probably Murgliata. Your referee needs to be a lot stronger there. Yeah. He was outside the cage, and he looked like someone who was lost looking for help.
Yeah.
Someone come get me and tell me what the right thing to do is. He had Herb Dean. Herb was clearly trying to avoid anybody noticing what they were communicating and forgot that he was mic'd up.
Yeah.
into a huddle with Mergliotta, and he said, "If you're not comfortable with this, you can make it a no contest." Like,
Yeah.
Mergliotta needs to. You wouldn't see if Mark Goddard was the referee there.
Yeah.
That
He
would
wouldn't be looking
handled
for
a
help.
whole lot differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think very suspect out of Mergliotta there, the way he handled that. Whose opinion I'd love to get on it is Derek's. I really would.
Yeah,
you know,
we'll need to get him on in the near future. Maybe we'll try and get him on at some stage during the week for an interview, and we'll try and play it then next week. But I think Herb handled it well. I know, obviously, not realizing you're mic'd up, but he told him the right thing to do, essentially, that it had, the minute had passed, the victory should be Douka's, but if you're uncomfortable, it's your call. Make it a no contest. He kind of put a little bit of confidence back in Dan Mergliotta, who then went and unfortunately made the wrong call. But I do feel for him a bit. It's a scenario, like I said, that I've never really seen before.
No.
To that extent. But you could argue as well that he maybe should have got there quicker and stopped the fight, because Kevin Holland was out cold.
Well, the minute Holland went out cold, you're no longer able to intelligently defend yourself. The fight is stopped.
Yeah.
Just because Holland woke up, I still think the fight is over.
Yeah.
In my own head, and my interpretation of the rules, which I've read 4,000 times.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's the equivalent of a TKO. You're not knocked out cold, but you can't defend yourself because you're rocked or you're in trouble. Just to look at the rest of that card, there was a lot of action on last night, and we're obviously not going to get to the whole lot, and I do want to briefly touch on the Bellator card as well. I'm going to bring in the comments there quickly before we do. Quilcha Dabara, watched some of it earlier and turned it off as quick as I turned it on. The absolute state of that fight. So that's about Santos and Walker. Quilcha's on fire tonight, man. And then he's saying, get that Liverpool jersey off. Yeah, we didn't have the best day today, but we're still up the top of the league. Well,
do you know who Quilcha Dabara supports in football?
I imagine it's fucking United. He just, probably.
Burnley.
Get the fuck out of here. Burnley.
He was at... The reason that guy is in Leeds Airport drunk right now is he was at Burnley and Norwich yesterday.
I mean, the worst two teams in the Premier League.
But in all seriousness, you need to get Quilcha on this. Quilcha he's a fantastic ambassador for Irish MMA and 100%. Amateur MMA through MIMA.
And great to see him that he's got that role with Severe MMA. He'll do great things over there. Those guys have needed a resurgence of late. I think Quilcha is the guy. He's a good rider, so it's a great move for him. But if he's willing to come on, we'd be more than happy to have you, Quilcha. Greg, it was actually Kieran O'Connor said to take off the jersey. Apologies. We're giving Quilcha shit for supporting Burnley then. Greg O'Sullivan, surely telling a fighter they're winning the fight at any stage is dangerous. Not necessarily, because if you're going into a 5-round fight and you've won 4 rounds, kind of telling them don't be slinging your load, and this one is do you know what I mean? It's sometimes there is a time to be telling a fighter he's winning the fight and not to be going gung-ho. Will Getling says all Irish fighters should be cut from the UFC. That's just Will Getling. We've been hating on the Americans apparently of late, so he's just on a warpath now.
Fighting words there, Getling.
Yeah. Quilcha Dabara, speaking of Irish MMA, Hulk up again soon is very exciting. Yeah, so we're going to get Hulk. I don't know if he's announced yet that he's going to be what he's fighting on, but he's going to be fighting very soon. So we'll be getting that first one back. Greg O'Sullivan, how would a no contest affect the rankings, if at all? I don't think it affects at all. And Quilcha Dabara, yup the clarets. Oh Jesus! Don't be bragging about supporting Burnley. That's embarrassing. But just the rest of that card. Quickly looking at it, what kind of stood out to you on that card?
Utter disappointment that we had to witness Misha Serkinov, who's never been to a decision in the UFC, go to decision. Nico Price, who goes to kill or be killed every fight, go to decision. And Johnny Walker go to decision. Thought Alex Hernandez looked good, but clearly up against an unmatched fighter who couldn't make weight. Hernandez cycle there of beat, I hate to use the term lower level, but beat lower level fighters and then come into the rankings potential and then get hit. Casey O'Neill, there's one now that really stood out. Man, she is good. Yeah,
there was 2 fights stood out for me. Obviously, Casey, Jesus Christ, and Hulk knows the family. Hulk's gone over and trained in their gym over in Australia. So he's been on to me about this girl since before she signed to the UFC. I questioned before this fight. I can't remember. She fought. Jesus Christ, you probably know, do you? Before the Shevchenko
I
fight.
can't remember off the top of my head. Was it?
Yeah.
I tell you,
I have it here.
I know
anyway,
she
I
fought
can pull it
Shayna
up.
Dobson in her first fight, and she fought a European fighter in her second one. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, but she fought
Beat the socks off her anyway.
Lara Procopio before
Yeah.
this one. And I said going into that one that maybe it was a little bit too soon. I watched that fight and I said, oh no, absolutely not. There's nothing too soon for this girl. And then she got matched against Shevchenko and I was like, oh, Jesus, big step up again. But she's a violent woman. And she's going to take some stopping.
Shevchenko in name only is what I would say there now with Antonina.
I'll tell you what. It's the most impressed I've been with Shevchenko. That first round was the most impressed I've been with Antonina in a while now. She came forward. She was throwing her strikes. I'm not saying she's on the level of her sister, but we've seen her hesitant and kind of shy away from the fight in a lot of her recent bouts. And this was the first one that I've seen her come forward, throw a lot of strikes, throw a lot of her kicks. So I was somewhat impressed with her until Casey grabbed a hold of her in the second round and just started having her way with her. But the other fight I was impressed with was Jared Gordon and Joe Selecki. I've been a fan of Joe since he got to the UFC. He got through the Dana White Contender Series, and we had him on last year on the podcast. But like that guy's jiu-jitsu is leagues above a lot of guys in that division. And Jared Gordon did phenomenal. Look, I know he's a great wrestler, but that first round he looked like he was in big trouble for most of that first round. And to come back and win the fight, I was very impressed.
Yeah, Gordon has a cool story. Can't say I'm a fan of him at all. Following him outside the octagon, seeing some of the things he does outside, it irritates me a little bit. But it was a good fight. He fought well, but I wasn't particularly enamored with the standard in the fight. I suppose it was good for entertainment purpose, but it didn't really do anything for me. It was kind of right. This is a prelim fight with pretty much zero implications. For what I'm going with. Malarkey on the prelims was probably the one that I enjoyed the most. But it was a funny card on the prelims. There was a lot of funny matching, I think, matchmaking done on it.
Yeah, and the matchmaking of late has been very good. The last 2 to 3 months there's been a lot of phenomenal cards. This is the first one that is for kind of the opening couple of prelims. From what I've heard, I haven't got to see a couple of them yet, but they were very good. And then there was a lull for the rest of the evening. There was a lot of there was mostly decisions and very few exciting fights.
Yeah, I think when Betch Correa came out, I was like, whoa, 2021, and I'm watching this. What am I doing with my life? That kind of way.
Yeah, it's when did she fight Ronda Rousey? That was 2015, I want to say.
6 or 7 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that girl should have retired then. Let's be fair about it. And I don't want to be hating on her, but yeah, it's we're a long way removed from them, and she's back fighting in the UFC, so it's a strange one. Just to bring in there quickly some comments before we touch on Bellator. I don't know if you saw the Bellator card, did you?
I did, yeah. I watched it simultaneously with the Cage Warriors. Right?
Yeah,
they were matched at the same time.
Yeah, I knew you said you were watching the Cage Warriors one, so I wasn't sure. What I have to touch on this before we even get to the fight. What about Michael Venom Page's walkout? That was absolutely sensational.
Skepta singing him into the ring. That was brilliant.
Sensational walkout. Like I can't understand why the UFC don't do more of that. I know it costs money, but like remember Adesanya's walkout in New Zealand when he had the dance and like it all adds to the entertainment value. These are fights that you remember for these reasons. What happens in the fight obviously plays a bigger role, but remember 189. McGregor and Chad Mendes walking out. That's infamy stuff for UFC. If they do that once or twice a year, they're adding to the entertainment value, in my opinion.
I was at 189 and it was amazing watching Sinead O'Connor sing McGregor as an Irishman, just sing him into the ring to the Foggy Jew. It was.
I can imagine.
It was amazing, and even Mendes coming in, Aaron Lewis sang him. That was brilliant as well. Yeah. But then. To your previous there, it's going to cost them money, and that's not something they're pretty good with.
Yeah, but they might get more viewers if you hear, like, let's say Aldo's in a main event, he's fighting for the bantamweight title. You get Rihanna on. I mean, you're gonna get 100,000 people tune in just to watch fucking Rihanna sing. So I don't know.
Triller tried it there with the Jake Paul cards to have all these superstars on it. And those cards lost an absolute fortune. So
true enough, but I mean the level of fights on that are we won't touch on that. But we'll before we do talk about the MVP fight, just as a comment there from Quilja, right lads, I'm boarding this plane. See you on the other side. I'll happily hop on sometime for a chat about Irish MMA. I'll even pop in by person if I'm in Cork. Thanks for your entertainment of a Sunday. No problem at all, Quilja, and you're always welcome here down, Jim, and to jump on a podcast. Actually, it'd be great to get the two of you take a trip down and get the two of you on the podcast. We've got number 50 coming up in a couple of weeks, so we're hoping to do a big one for that. So if we could get a crowd in for it in studio, it would be a good one. We'll talk about that off air maybe. So yes, this fight between Michael Venom Page and Douglas Lima. How did you score it?
29-28, Michael Venom Page.
And I'm the same. And weirdly, I'm everything I see online, everyone's giving out that Venom Page won that fight.
My understanding of the judging criteria for what's released for us to read is that damage is king.
Yeah.
Knockdown in the second round.
Yeah, that's the round.
Was above the grappling of Lima. Mm-hmm. From my interpretation of the rules, the judging criteria. Now, saying that the fight was lackluster, why don't Bellator just turn on 5-round main events? We all want it.
Yeah, it needed another 2 rounds. Both guys were fresh, and they were like the first round there was a lot of feeling out as well. So we could have done with a third or fourth and fifth round in that fight for sure.
It's not over. I think MVP even said he wants to do the trilogy as well.
Yeah.
And go with it. It's not over. Like Lima looked good and he nearly caught him with the exact same sequence, the sweep into the uppercut.
Just missed the kind of shovel uppercut, yeah.
Yeah, but I think MVP, like round one, he was really, really good on the feet. He dropped him, cracked him with that lovely leaping in kind of it's half a Superman punch almost. Was really, really nice work. Lima clearly won round 3 with his grappling heavy stance, and then I think round 2 was the controversial one. Yeah. But MVP is a bit like, Conor McGregor. People just online flock to hate him, and they can't understand. Wow, this guy is actually really fucking good at the sport. And they just ignored everything that went on with it, and they saw Lima on top of him and just say, "Oh, okay, Lima's winning this."
Yeah, and we're still getting the same rhetoric from the fans as well, that he's fought nobody. I mean, I'll agree with you. He fought at least a dozen bums in his career. But, I mean, in his last 6 fights, he's been fighting guys that are elite level fighters. He's had
Derek
no
Anderson,
easy fight.
Paul Daly, Lima twice. Like, you turn Paul Daly into a wrestler, you're a different level.
100%. And who's the Scottish fella he fought as well? What's his name?
Ross Houston.
Ross Houston. And we know over here, Ross Houston is a beast.
Beast.
And, not an easy fight in any way. And he fought Richard Kiley. Look, the Richard thing, Richard had a lot of hype going into that, and he was going to be a problem for everyone. But he made it look like the easiest work of all time.
I had 20 quid on Kylie that fight. I bought into the hype myself.
I think we all did. We were all up in the Tree Arena at that stage. But
I was myself.
Yeah, it was a good night until that happened. But yeah, it was a good night.
Just to loop back there on Ross Houston, I think Bellator are dropping the ball so bad with Houston. They debuted him against MVP in France, and now he's on the Brian Moore card in Russia,
fighting a Russian.
Buried.
Yeah.
Down the bottom of it. Did you see the Houston Dalby fight in Cage Warriors?
Yeah.
Legendary stuff with blood all over the canvas. Terrible promoting by them.
I know, but they were slipping in the blood towards the end. Like, it was absolutely bananas, that fight. But yeah, he's a guy. But Brian Moore's been terribly promoted for how long? He should be a guy that's been on main cards. These are guys, they're entertaining fighters. You put them on a main card and people tune in when they fight. It's your... Who would you have in the UFC? You'd have Cowboy Cerrone, I'm trying to think of guys that always kind of bring it. Mike Perry, Johnny Walker before this weekend. But those kind of guys that when you book them, it's going to be an exciting fight. The two guys are buried in the prelims in Russia, but we'll still get two good fights out of them.
Look, we all know why Brian is over in Russia. We know what they're trying to do with the Irish card there.
Yeah.
And they filled up their tank, shall we say, and now Brian has to go out to Russia. It's pissing me off because I want to see Brian Moore do work, live in
the Tree Arena
in person. I'm not getting to do that now because he's over in Russia fighting a very difficult opponent, no doubt, but I've never heard of his opponent.
Yeah. But he's a 7-0 Dagestani. I mean, that's kind of all you need to know at this point. Like you pretty much know what you're going to get out of him, although apparently his striking is very good.
You're not going to strike Brian Moore, though.
No, absolutely not. He'll be scrambling for a takedown after about a minute. Speaking of Irish MMA, we did, of course, have Leah McCourt on the London card as well, and I do want to touch on that. Another win for Leah. Tough fight, though. Borga brought the fight to her and made it a tough fight. And it kind of, I talked on Pro and Predictions this week about how she finds herself in a weird predicament where could be 2 fights away from a title fight, just because of where she is in the rankings and how the rankings were set up. And she, like, at 6-1 now, it's hard to see her going in against the likes of Cyborg and Borga bringing to her like that. What do you think they do with Leah next? Do you think she keeps fighting unranked girls for now?
Yeah, absolutely. She's nowhere near the level.
But how does she maintain a number 5 ranking and being ahead of some of the girls that she's ahead of, fighting unranked girls?
Unfortunately for Leah, she's a featherweight, and a featherweight female is going to be ranked at the end of the day. She's a lot of hype behind her, but she's not there. She's very rough. I know she's got that IMAF pedigree, and she's done well as a pro.
Yeah.
Her striking looked a lot better against Borga the other night than it had previously.
Yeah.
She's usually do his work on the ground, but I have to say that if Leah McCourt and Sinead Kavanagh were put in a cage,
you're putting your house on Sinead.
I think it would be a massacre. I think we're promoting the wrong, or not we. I think Bellator are promoting the wrong Irish female.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I think McCourt will have a far more successful time in the media when she's finished fighting. But I just, I want to support all Irish MMA fighters, but I just don't see it with McCourt myself. I know, and I know that won't be a popular opinion.
No, I just think right now, definitely not. I think there's a long journey ahead of her before she could try and argue for a title shot or anything like that. But these rankings have it all upside down, and it's confusing, the situation, because you look at the rankings, a girl at 5 pick you up a victory. I mean, you argue that, and she's 6 wins in a row. You argue that the only way is for her to fight number 1 or number 2 in the world or 3 in the world, and it makes no sense right now.
No, it does not. It does not.
It's a tough sell, but I hope the best for her, and I hope she does get some easy opponents before she gets thrown to the wolves, because I think it's coming in the very near future. She's going to get put in there with someone who's going to just be a little bit above her level. Yeah,
she's asking to get onto the Irish card as well straight away, which is good. Keep busy, I suppose. But when you go into that, the higher level of Bellator's 145 division, they're very good. They're very, very good, talented females.
And you have a few new faces going to be joining that division. In the near future.
It's like the Bellator rankings could probably have its own podcast, never-ending podcast going through the problems with it anyway. But it is, if she is carrying at number 5, with people around her like 6, 7, 8, 9 are going to say, why aren't I fighting? This girl. So I was disappointed.
Like that's a good point. If you're number 10 in the world right now at featherweight, who are you calling out in that division to move up?
You're calling out McCourt without a doubt.
I mean, these are all very seasoned girls. If you probably can pull up the rankings there and let me know who's. I know Sinead is in a number 6. Janae is in a number 9. She's obviously beat Janae, but there are some tough girls still behind her. It's a strange one. elsewhere on that card, just to touch on while you're looking that up there, you had Luke Traynor had a phenomenal performance against Yannick Bahadi. He looks like this kid could be the real deal. And he's absolutely fucking huge as well. I don't remember him being that
6'6".
big. But
He's a monster.
I don't remember him being that big. I've seen him fight, and I maybe he was just fighting a really tall guy as well, but he just looked like an absolute fucking freak in there against Yannick.
Like the finishing sequence, the elbow was sick, but it was it was like the front kick. It was almost set up like a teep. He's so tall, he could kick straight to the face. It was crazy, and what a humble guy as well. Mm-hmm. He was one that came out of that glowing.
Yeah.
Like he ticked all the boxes. He was charismatic. He was a nice guy. The fans loved him. He put on a hell of a performance. The sky looks like it's the limit for that guy. But again, he's in that position where I think he's 6-0 now, or 5-0, 6-0.
Yeah.
Their light heavyweight division is not deep, and he's going to find himself in deep waters pretty soon if he continues to look like that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but the one thing is, obviously, we had the light heavyweight tournament. It's not finished yet, but we know who's in it. Like, I mean, there are some big names in that division right now. You're saying it's not that deep, but the guys that are there are some huge names in MMA in that division. Like, for a guy that's coming up, these are guys that he could potentially fight in the next couple of years. And he probably at 3-4-0 never thought he'd have the opportunity to fight these guys because they're all 39, 40 years old. He thought they'd be long retired from the sport before he'd get up there. So I would also argue that maybe he might want to get a rush up there and try and get a fight against a couple of these lads. Be it too soon, be it not too soon. He looks the real deal.
It's difficult to navigate where he's going to go. As you saw Christian Edwards a few weeks ago, highly touted Bellator fighter, and he was put away by Big Tuna Ben Parrish in 30 seconds in what was supposed to be just a gimme fight, if we'll call it. So where do you go with Traynor? Because he's obviously one. If I'm Bellator there, I'm like, right, this guy is one we're taking under our wing.
Luke called out Ben Parrish, I think.
Did he call out Parrish?
I think he called out Ben Parrish, and he had a couple of choice words for him as well, as far as I know.
Is this card simultaneous with Cage Warriors was an absolute fucking disaster from start to finish for me, to be perfectly honest.
Trying to keep track of it.
Having Paul Hughes and Morgan Charrier at the same time as MVP and Douglas Lima was tier 1 worst promoting of all fucking time. Like, from a European perspective, it was so frustrating.
Yeah, I didn't get to see the Paul Hughes and Charrier fight. Obviously, it's something I need to go back and watch, but you were saying it was an entertaining one.
You won't find a better fight in Cage Warriors this year, that's for damn sure. It was like a cinematic story the whole way through. The walkouts, the crowd, Ireland against France in the crowd, the commentary. I think Dan Hardy and Brad Wharton on commentary, man, they are good.
They're brilliant together.
It flows so well. I hope Brad really, I know he's involved in basically everything in regional MMA in the UK. Mm-hmm. I hope he really goes, gets a chance up the line. But it was amazing. Bellator was kind of, I suppose there were certain fights there where you're watching it going, what am I watching at times? It was it wasn't a very deep card. It was a good card to watch, but it was at times it was a little difficult.
But that's it. It's like we touched on with the Dublin card. There's a low budget going into these events in Europe right now. So I think we're going to have to take what we get at the top of the card and suffer through a couple of fights. But it is what it is. Look, I'm delighted the big shows are back over here, and long may it continue. And hopefully, as it does continue, the money generates and we get some big cards over here in the very near future. We are gone quite a bit over time, so I'm going to call it at that. Is there anything else you would like to, any other fights you'd like to shout out to before we leave?
No, just a tremendous weekend for Ireland. We had James Sheehan, Paul Hughes, Rhys McKee, Richie Smullen, probably missing someone else. I think Liam McCourt. I think we went 6-1 this weekend. Sensational weekend for Ireland, and the schedule is only going to be booming. Looking forward to seeing who Paz fighting, and who the Hulk is coming up against, because we love the boys down in Cork. So really looking forward to it.
So just a last fuck you, basically, to the John Kavanagh haters. 6-1 this weekend.
6-1 for Ireland this weekend. The Northern boys did an amazing job. I hope Graham Boylan brings them over to the SSE Arena in Belfast. I think Hughes, McKee, McColgan would sell it out.
Sell it out easily. Yeah.
So, and I think there's some talent up there, like Matty Elliott up there, Glenn McVeigh, and Quilcha de Barra's favourite fighter, Kyle Dougal, up there doing amazing work.
Very good. Where can we find you on social media before we let you go?
I'm on Twitter, Andy Hickey MMA. All I do is MMA stats and promote Irish MMA, nothing else.
Definitely one to follow if you're an MMA fan. Thank you very much for tuning in. Be sure and head over to YouTube and subscribe to the page Guts and Glory MMA, and head over to Facebook, The MMA Opinion, and give us a like on there too. Thank you very much for tuning in.
I want to fight with Chuck. Chuck.
I think he just blew his wad there.
Anderson Silva, you absolutely